Perfect. Okay, welcome guys. I am excited for today. I have a girl that I met over social media. And I absolutely think she's just adorable. She's a huge Disney. Oh, they went on this magical trip just recently and I want to go so bad. It looks awesome. Oh, she actually like does that stuff. So I need to hit her up to like schedule me a trip. Anyway, she's so freaking cute. So she is actually an adoptee and she has adopted, which I think is amazing. And I'm super excited to hear her story. Her name is Ashton, and like I said, I've connected with her through social media, and I'm excited to hear her story. I've kind of looked at her profile a little bit, but I obviously love learning and hearing and all that good stuff. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to her and let her share whatever she wants to share.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Ashton, like she said, an adoptee and adoptive mom. And so kind of I guess where my story starts is my parents adopted me at birth. My adoption was a closed adoption. So I had no contact with my birth mom or my birth dad, which he wasn't really in the picture as far as I knew when my parents were explaining my story. I did grow up knowing I was adopted, and I think that made a huge difference. My parents never really made it a big deal, but they always said that they would answer questions and really allowed space for that, which was really awesome for them growing up. And I would say I had curiosity, but I didn't push boundaries too much with curiosity in terms of asking, because when I would ask, they didn't have a lot of information to give me. And so it kind of just was like a closed door, it felt like, until I got a little bit older. And I felt like I always had like this positive view of adoption growing up. Like it was like my fun fact. Every time people asked like, what's unique about you? I'd be like, I'm adopted, and would think it was like the thing that made me unique. And so growing up, it was always like a positive thing. I didn't know any different. That was just my life growing up. And so when I got older, the age limit for knowing information is 18. And so when I turned 18, I had asked for information from my parents, but they didn't want to give it to me unless it was like in a specific way, which I found out later why. It was, they had like this grand idea of how they would tell me, and like wanted to answer all my questions, and like give me this letter from one of the nurses. And it was like this big fantasized idea in their heads. But when they kind of closed that door, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And so I didn't want that. And I was kind of rebellious at that age anyways. And so my poor parents, now I look back and I'm like, I'm sorry I was that way, but that's just the way it is sometimes. And so it's like they had this fantasized idea of how they thought reunion would go, and I had this idea of how I thought reunion would go, and they were complete opposites, and we didn't share our expectations. And so it just kind of like they missed the mark. And so anyways, they ended up telling me her name, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with the information. I will say, before they gave me her name, they did do one thing that I think was really smart, coming from a closed adoption. So I don't think this would apply to open adoptions, but they made me talk with 3 other people who had gone through the experience of reunification, just to get their story and hear what happened with them. And all 3 people I had talked to, reunifying was not, it didn't go the way that they thought it would. And it actually didn't go good at all in their mind. Like, one was her birth mom denied her completely and didn't want contact with her. Another one became a little bit too involved. Like, she didn't necessarily, she wanted to meet her, but she didn't know what she wanted after that. And the birth mom wanted a lot of connection, and she kind of didn't. And then the third one, I don't really remember what happened, but it didn't go well. And so I guess I kind of prepared myself for like worst case scenario, which I think in the beginning, I mean, that's probably was best for me because I didn't know what to expect. So and my friends were spending the night and my best friend, she was over, and she was logged in her Facebook when we were looking up her name, and she accidentally clicked add friend. And I was like, oh my gosh, like delete the request. Like, so she like quickly like deleted it. But all we could see was like a profile picture. And if it was of my half sister at the time, and she was a baby. And so I was like, well, she like has a new family, and like, I don't know how this is going to go. And so the next day I decided, okay, I'm going to friend request her, and we'll just see what happens. And so when I requested her, she pretty instantly added me back. And then about an hour later, like we both messaged each other at the same time, saying pretty much the same thing, which was crazy. And so we basically just said, like, I've waited for this for a long time. She said, I wasn't going to reach out to you. I was going to wait for you to reach out to me. And I said, like, I don't know if you're going to want a relationship with me, but I just wanted to like know who you are and let you know, like, I'm so thankful for the choice you made. And like my life I have now is awesome, but I don't know what my life would have been with you. And so to kind of just explore that. And so that was cool. And that's kind of like where our relationship started. So I was 18, about to be 19, actually, going into college was when that happened. And so whenever I got to college, we had been talking back and forth for a while. We might have talked on the phone, but it was going good. It was just pretty much casual banter. And then we decided, okay, like we're going to meet. And it was kind of crazy because I was living in Bentonville, Arkansas at the time, which Fayetteville is where I went to school, which is like 30 minutes from here. And she actually had a best friend in Fayetteville that she had visited over the years. So she had been within a 30-minute radius like several times, which is always funny as an adoptee because you always imagine going to the grocery store and like looking and finding someone who looks like you because growing up, I grew up in a family of four. I had three siblings, two older brothers, and then one younger sister who was only 8 months younger than me because my mom got pregnant right after she adopted me. And so, and they were all brunettes, and I was a blonde, blue-eyed girl, the only one who looked kind of like my dad. And so everyone would be like, oh, you look like Kelly, which is funny because I was like, well, I'm not like, that's not really my biological dad. But I think it's just something a lot of adoptees do is just look for racial mirroring. I feel like even as a white adoptee, which a lot of people say like racial mirroring is so important with transracial adoption, but it actually was super important to me too. And so just in a different way, but I think it's just funny. And so she was close, which was cool. So we ended up meeting. It was super awkward, but really cool. I had two half sisters at the time, and they were like really young. Now they're like in grade school, and it's crazy. But so, and anyways, it ended up going really good. Probably best case scenario in a reunification. We like made the same facial expressions. We have the same stature, like we're the same person. It's hilarious how you can go 19 years of your life not knowing this person, and then you're exactly the same as them. So nature versus nurture is something I'm super interested in talking about. And I actually have on my Instagram page, I have a whole tab about it with my brother-in-law who's a therapist, and we talked about it. And it just is mind-blowing how much nature has to do with who you are, and nurture adds to that. But I mean, you are who you are at your core because of your parents. And so, yeah, so that was really cool. And so now we're like 9 years post reunion, and I probably see her every few months. She lives in Dallas. And so the hard part about reunification that I talk a lot about is when I went to college and we had met, like things had went really good, but I didn't know how to process like this whole other life, aside from my parents. I was trying to be really sensitive to my mom and the whole thing, and like had asked her, and her feelings were hurt because she wanted to be there whenever I met my birth mom, but I didn't want that. And so just like juggling like expectations, wants, needs, everything was on me, because you had my expectation of my mom, my expectation of my birth mom, and like what they wanted. And it all fell on me. And I feel like I wasn't being heard completely, and like what I wanted and how I wanted it to go. And so that was really hard. And so freshman year of college, like, I feel like I didn't know how to process everything. And I had this newfound freedom of like, I didn't have to answer to anyone, and I didn't have to, you know, my parents weren't watching over me every 2 seconds. And so I kind of went a little crazy. I partied, I found my identity and other things. And it just was, I think, looking back now, I didn't relate it to meeting my birth mom. But now looking and going through therapy, like I can see how that year and going into my sophomore year, I just fell into depression and had a lot of rejection happen. And so I feel like looking back, that was kind of when I started coming out of the fog and learning like what adoption really was and how it affected me and the trauma it had on me. Because like I said, everything had been positive up until that point. And so sophomore year, like I said, I got really depressed. I stopped going to class. My parents ended up coming to college and getting me and saying, like, if you're not going to go to class, we're going to bring you home, which was really hard. And so I decided I was going to move to Texas, which is where my birth mom lives. And I was just going to start a new life there, which made my parents really nervous. My mom will tell you to this day, she didn't think I was going to come home. She thought, like, she's leaving forever. She's not coming home. And so whenever I did that, I was just, I wanted a relationship with my birth mom. I wanted a relationship with my half sisters. I just wanted to explore that life a little bit more, because I never could. And so that was like a really hard but good year of just discovering like the dark side of adoption that a lot of people don't talk about. And so although my reunion story is super positive and great and things ended up being okay, I would say there was still so much underneath it that I had no clue what was going on that would carry over for the next 5 years after I moved in with my birth mom that I didn't know was directly related to adoption. It just led me to a really dark place, depression, like I said, just feeling like lost and didn't know who I was anymore. And I just dealt with a lot of identity issues of like, where do I come from and who am I because of it? And what would my life have been if it would have been this other life? And how does that affect me in the present? And so it was like a few years later, I had gotten a job as a house mom for girls who age out of foster care. And there they offered me therapy for free because I was dealing with a lot of other people's emotions and their traumas. And so I'd say that was like the beginning of healing for me, of understanding like, okay, I had a trauma at the very beginning of my life that never went away. And just because things were great and good and positive doesn't mean that there wasn't stuff underneath it that built up over time and caused mental health issues, depression, stuff that I really needed to work on. And so, yeah, it's cool to see the healing side of it now. But everything you had to go through prior. And I feel like that's the stuff that a lot of people don't talk about in adoption because you want to talk about the rainbows and butterflies. And so I'm glad I have that unique perspective now and that I was able to get therapy to understand it. Because I feel like a lot of adoptees are stuck in they just feel like they need to be positive because that's the way they grew up, and they might be dealing with things that are underneath. And I would just say, like, dig into that. And because even if it seems like something small, it can turn into something bigger, and that deserves healing, and you deserve healing. And healing only comes through recognizing that that was from adoption trauma, and not realizing it wasn't on you, that it wasn't just like a fault in yourself. Because for so long I was like, oh, I got depressed and I did all these things because I'm a bad person. But it really had nothing to do with me. It had a lot more to do with, this is my situation. I didn't know how to process it. And so going on now, 9 years later of post-reunion and healing and therapy, we've adopted this past year. And so that's been really cool and hard at the same time, because I just know everything that he's probably going to go through. But at the same time, having that perspective as an adoptive parent and an adoptee has been so helpful. And like when people say comments like, oh, he's so lucky to have you, and you're so blessed and you're all this and that, it's like, well, no, like I'm not anything. Like, he's a blessing to us, but like I want to change how adoption is viewed, because he didn't choose this. And hold on just a second. Sorry. He didn't choose this, and it's now our responsibility to raise him, and raise him in a way that he can feel whatever feelings he has and emotions, and be able to talk and process those through an open adoption. And while open adoption isn't going to change the trauma he has, it will hopefully give him an outlet to be able to explore who he is and where he comes from, especially because it's a transracial adoption, and he's Marshallese. And so we really want to incorporate his culture and heritage in our life. His birth parents live 30 minutes away, so we have a local and open adoption, which is a game changer. We get to see his birth parents every other week right now. And that's not to say that might not change in the future, but we have super open communication of what works best for both of us, and both of his parents want to be involved, and we love that. And he is going to see people who look like him, and he is going to grow up knowing that we're doing everything we can for him in the situation that we've all put him in, and just do what's best for him, because in the end, that's who it's about. It's about the adoptee, and just for him to have the support he needs to grow up and just thrive, hopefully. Because to us, like, that's everything, and we will do anything to help him get there, which includes, like, we're probably going to end up moving to the town that his birth parents live in, because there is more of the culture there, and the school he would go to would have more kids who look like him, and we want to hopefully learn the Marshallese language and just give him every opportunity to explore who he is and where he comes from. I think that was my biggest takeaway from what I learned in healing, is it's so important to know who you are because of where you come from. So if you can start at the root and then go from there, you have a lot of room to work with. But until you know who you are because of where you come from, you're going to feel lost in your identity. And so anyways, hopefully that is hopeful to both adoptees and adoptive parents. I always say, like, as adoptive parents, we're not always going to get this 100% right. We're always going to be learning. There's no excuse for not educating yourself anymore. There's way too many resources out there to not be educated. And so I would just say, like, follow adoptees, follow transracial adoptees, follow birth parents for empathy purposes, to know where they come from and treat them as human. That's like one of my favorite relationships I have now, is with my birth mom and with Levi's birth mom. Is just, they're people who made a decision that they thought was best at the time. And I always tell Levi's birth mom that, she's always like, well, we just wanted to give him a better life. And I say, It's not a better life. It's a different life. He would have had a fine life with you if that's what you would have chosen. And just to remind them that they are worthy and they deserve just as much love from both you and your child, because that is a child you share now. And just to keep going with love and open heart and space, and always be willing to learn. So hopefully.
No, I love it. And like, seriously, no, it was. And this is my favorite thing about doing these is everybody, like throughout the interview, they nail something completely different. And I 100% love, because my adoption thing is the exact same way. Super positive, my whole life, everything. And then once I turned 30, I was like, oh, and married with a couple kids. I'm like, I think I want to try and look for my birth family.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, stop. And so, I mean, and then finding out things with my birth family and all that kind of thing. Cause then so I am, my family, like my parents are Caucasian, and then they have 4 biologically of their own. So for me, it's a little different, and
yeah,
that way. But I love that you said, even though that you're white, that you still need that, because I 100% agree. Because like you said, your siblings are all brunettes or whatever. And then you're like, oh, hey, there's me. Like, and that is probably, like you said, one of the hardest things about being an adoptee, because you don't want to smush and stomp on people's feelings. But at the same time, your feelings are 100% valid that you have, like 100%. So I love that, because I think that's really hard. And I like how the shift has come with, because I feel like adoptions were closed, all of us kind of in this same age pool. And now they're more open. And adoption, to me, like I've learned, is so much different. And the relationships they have with the birth families, I think, are just so amazing. And so I don't know, it's just so good, and it's so different, and it's so crazy. But I love that it's taken that shift. And I love that I think the dark parts need to be talked about more, because like you said, I don't think, like you said, people want to keep happy, upbeat, especially with where this crazy ass world is right now.
Yep.
You know what I mean, though? But like, so it's just, but those need to be addressed, because people have those feelings, every single person. And it's crazy, because like off camera with a couple of, fellow adoptees, after we stop interviews, then they open up a little bit more, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have those things. But granted, I get they don't want to share that 100%. That's their story. They don't need to share that. But sometimes you do need to know the dark parts, because like you said, those 3 girls that you interviewed, they didn't have good experiences. And so when they see something like mine or like yours, where it ends up, you meet the birth family and it's actually something really beautiful that blossoms, then they're like, oh, it's going to be like that. And it's like, oh, it's not like that all the time, because it's just not. But I think it's awesome that you guys have such a good relationship with his birth parents. That's like, so like, that just blows my mind. Every single person I've talked to just has such good relationships with birth parents. I think that's amazing.
Well, and I feel it's like, because us, like, whenever we met our birth parents, or if you do and you have, it's like all at once. And it's like, you can't process these emotions as they come. So it's not like, oh, my birth mom didn't want me. Oh, and then you layer on this, and then you layer on this. It's like, over time, like, he's going to have these realizations. Like, we all do. Like, we all feel unwanted at some point. We all feel like we are commodity at one point. We all feel like we were sold at one point. Like, it was like everything hits you at once when you go into reunion. But for open adoptions, it's like slowly over time, and hopefully we can communicate and talk about these feelings. And then like he can talk to his birth mom about it and see where she was at. Cause it's so different when you just don't have another side. Like, you only have your parents' side, and you're like, well, what happened? Cause I didn't share this either, but I met my birth dad last year, and like, I still don't know the whole story of where he was at with everything, but like what my parents said was just like, he didn't have any interest in being involved. They had to get him to sign papers and all this stuff. And it's like, well, now he's like a really awesome person. Like, when we met, my husband was joking, because he was like, I kind of didn't want to like him, because I didn't want another relationship to add, like another family to visit. Like, we already have a lot going on. And he's like, but he was so cool. Like, I really liked him. I was like, I know, I did too. Like, and so it's just interesting to just see. And, you know, like open adoptions, it's going to be funny because there's going to be a whole new generation of adoptees who come out and say like, what was wrong with open adoption? And like, we're going to be on the other end. I'm going to be on the other end of that and be like, I tried, like, I thought I was doing what was best, but it's like, you're never going to get it right, but hopefully we're going to do better. And that's the thing, is like, I'm sure my parents thought closed adoption was the better option because that's what was taught back then. Like that's what they did. There was not really another option. And they told, you know, the birth parents to go forget what happened and that's what's best for you. And they told the adoptive parents, you just need to move on and act like this is your child, and that's what you do. And so as we see, education has furthered and said that's actually the complete opposite of what's best for the child. And so anyways, I'm sure we'll have these videos coming out in 20 years from now, and I'm going to be like, I'm so sorry I screwed you up. Like, I tried. But
no, not at all. No, and that's, yeah, exactly. Like, that's the crazy thing. It's, and I think there was that, and I think you probably feel it too. And all the other adoptees that I've interviewed that are like older, is there's that sense of like, you need to numb that emotion completely out, cut off from everything with the birth family.
mm-hmm.
And then, but at the same time, like, I mean, for you too, it's like so relevant that I'm not white and I'm in a white family, and it's like, hey, where's like the Colombian and the Hispanicness and all of this in here? And it's so crazy because, like you were saying, there are mannerisms that my birth mom and all my siblings do that I'm just like, holy cow, like things that I see and I'm like, I've never been around them because I've never met them because they're in Colombia. Mm-hmm. And so we haven't gotten there to go see them yet. But like,
one day when you get there, you guys are going to be like backs facing and your husband's be like, I thought you were your mom and your mom was you. And it's so fun. People are like, you guys have the same laugh and it weirds me out. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, genetics are a weird thing.
It is. It's crazy.
But
like,
it's
yeah.
Like, it's like you said, like for Levi, like he's missing out on Marshallese culture, which is beautiful. Like, I hate that for him. I hate that he doesn't get to be around that 24/7, but hopefully him being around it some is us, you know. And my husband came in the other day and he was like, I think we really need to get serious about learning Marshallese. And I'm like, I think so too, because it's like, he's only 4 months right now, but his, grandparents and great grandparents, they only speak Marshallese. So if he wants a way to communicate with them, like, who are we to hold that back from him? And like you said, like growing up with Caucasian parents, like you're just not getting the culture, the history, the like language. I mean, if your birth parents live in Colombia, like if they speak a different language and you can't communicate with them, like that stinks. And so just to give opportunity, at least, he might not care at all, but that's on him at the end of the, like that's, every adoptee is different. You can't say they're going to care about one thing and they might not, but.
No, it's so true. It's so true. Cause there's different things that are important to different, adoptees and that are prevalent to their story. And so I get that. And yeah, exactly. Because when I met him, I'm like, oh crap, they all speak Spanish. But the crazy thing is my littlest brother, he speaks English and Spanish because the way that they kind of were all raised, he went and lived with his godmother. And then she had sons that flew in and out to the United States all the time. And so when they'd go back home, they'd strictly speak English to him and they'd only let him talk English. So when I met him, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no coincidence that you know English. So I can talk to him like all the time, any of the time. The other one's like Google Translate and all that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, it's just crazy. But I'm with you. I think the way it was taught back then and just the unknown, they did everything to protect us and to make sure everything was smooth and okay. And like you said, with the revealing, and they wanted everything to be okay. And you're like, wait. Like, I need to, my opinion matters too, because this is me.
Yeah.
this is me that's going on, not you. I understand you want, but so yeah. No, I think that's awesome. And you're a little boy, and you are also pregnant too. When's that baby due?
Yes. So like I was saying, my mom found out she was pregnant and same thing happened with us. So, we come full circle. He's due in May, and so they'll be 6 months apart.
Oh
so
my gosh. How fun though. I mean, it's gonna be crazy, but it's gonna be so fun. You're probably like, no, it's not. A month into it, or like, yeah.
Well, I will say I'm like, Levi is an angel baby, mostly because of his birth parents. They are so chill, so patient, the best. I'm like, praise the Lord, you are just like them. Like, I love it. Then you're gonna have our biological child who hopefully will turn out semi-normal.
Really fun.
I'm like,
That's
me and
too
my husband
funny.
are a bit crazy, so
So funny.
got a
No.
50-50% chance.
No, I
But it would
think
be so fun. I mean, growing up with my sister and us being so close in age, like, was so fun. And now we're best friends. So I'm
awesome.
praying that is the case for them and that they will both love each other. And I mean, they're going to be so close. They're going to have to. So
No, it'll be awesome. It'll be amazing. So is there anything else that you want to share? Like I love what you shared already. It's awesome.
I don't think so. I think I covered a lot in a little bit of time.
Thank you so much for taking some time out of your night. And I'm so glad we finally got to touch base and get this. And like, seriously, I really, really appreciate it. And I love learning, like, because I learn something new every single time. Like, and it's my favorite thing because there's bits and pieces to everybody's story that I can relate to. It's just crazy how everything intertwines. But thank you. I know it's getting late where you're at, so I will let you go. But thank you.
I thank you too. I think it's really cool that you're sharing people's stories because I think that, you know, at the end of the day, like, that's what changes the world is everyone has such a unique story. And like on my Instagram, I have like on one of my last bio is tell your story, share your faith, because I just fully believe like that is your story is yours and no one can argue with that. They can try to, but at the end of the day, like, your experience is your experience. And while I can't share, you know, from a transracial adoption point of view or educate on that point of view, I can share my story and educate on that point of view. And so if we would all just take our stories and advocate for what we believe in and what we've gone through, that's where real change happens, because it's a powerful testimony of where you've come from and where you're going. And so I just appreciate you sharing people's stories and just letting them shed light on things that they're passionate about. And that's going to change the world. So
no, I agree. And I think like I said, with the way the world is, we just need to do this with everybody. Every freaking human just needs to love one another and learn from one another.
Yep. It's like, you don't have to be positive, but we are for sure going to learn something from you.
Exactly. So again, thank you seriously so much for doing this. And I really, really appreciate it. And I love learning your story and I love getting to know you better. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.